And we're live. I want to
Wow.
thank everybody for coming out tonight for this surprise No Man's Land. I've got Dark Leftovers with me. Dark, you want to go ahead and say hello to everybody?
Hello, everyone. We're trying to do something new here, and we want to try to get some content out a little more often now. And I mean, just in general too. I mean, I know our schedules don't really intermix, so we probably won't have the whole piece of the puzzle. But I think we could still offer, at least just more consistent stuff. No promises, but just something we want to try out doing. Hopefully, this goes very well.
Yep. And for those that don't know me, I'm Kasansky, working here with Mr. Leftovers. And what we're going to be doing, as Dark said, is experimenting a little bit. We're trying to offer content that's Foxhole based, but also kind of speaks to some of our skill sets here. So Dark and I were talking about things that we could do and kind of offer to the community. And one of the things that we thought was kind of a missing element was leadership development, self improvement principle. I mean, whatever it is, but when you think about it, in Foxhole, leadership's like the most important thing you can offer. Like in the game, and in any mill sim, really, it's a component. And so we wanted to offer that back to the community in some respects. So we're going to experiment with that and see if it's well received by either our guys or other members of the community, and see if it's something that people want more of. I will say, it's a little kind of odd to approach this venue, and I'm going to take 30 seconds to kind of mention why I feel that I'm qualified to at least speak on this subject, because a lot of you guys know me as Kaz, leader of Reductus and a whole bunch of ducks, and that's good. That's a good title. I'm good with that. But professionally, I've actually got a lot of experience in leadership development and human resources specifically. I've got about 10 years in the field working in hospitals, and so I know a lot, and I've seen a lot in the leadership field because I've studied it for both professional reasons, and ironically, I've studied it even for gaming ones because it's my hobby. And so one of the things I like to do and I'm very passionate about is synthesizing a lot of these principles into easy to understand, I guess, nuggets that can be appreciated both professionally, personally, and yes, even in the gaming field, because these principles of leadership and a lot of principles that we intend to talk about in this, if this goes well, kind of transcend all those things. And so it really is designed to help us be better as individuals in every context of our life. That's kind of where my head is, and what the inspiration is for kind of what we're looking to offer with this. And so, as I said, I'm going to beg your patience with us as we do this. I'm a bit novice to streaming here, so if I mess something up or I make a misclick or something goes up in flames, you have to work with us on that while we kind of work out any technical glitches with me trying to get acclimated to this. And also is I know that when we stream and we have a podcast like this, I want to have a good discussion, of course, between Dark and whoever joins us with the chat. If you have questions, feel free to put questions, thoughts, whatever, and we'll try to respond to those in real time if we are flexible to do so. But nevertheless, it's a little bit different for me presenting a subject like this and having kind of a conversation about while we talk. And so I'm going to try not to overdo it and like talk over Dark the whole time. And so that may be a little clunky and awkward as we kind of find our rhythm as well. So that's kind of where we're at. And we'll just go ahead and dive right into it. Dark, you got anything else to add?
Well, just saying off the fact that I have absolutely no qualification whatsoever to speak. It's gonna be it's gonna be an interesting thing because during the streams of the normal No Man's Land, you kind of have this backseat approach, but here your role is gonna be reversed, and you're gonna be mainly speaking, and I'm gonna have to like the whole time you were speaking, I had like no, I couldn't just interrupt. I was fascinated just listening to you the whole time, and I'm like, oh god. I have to say something too. Like, I don't know what to say. I don't even know if I can even reply to any of these things.
So here's the beauty of it, though, right? Because you do have a lot of experience leading in the gaming environment, and a lot of the principles that we are going to apply, you're going to recognize right out the gate as things that you have done well, and maybe things that you've done poorly. And I think that that's kind of a interesting perspective to offer and can generate some dialogue as we go through this. So I hope that will be pretty natural as we go through. But I really covet that dialogue and making this collaborative, so it's not just me talking for 30 or 45 minutes. You know what I mean? And so we're going to give that a go and see if we can get it off the ground. So nevertheless, we're going to go ahead and dive into the slides that have been prepared here.
Here we go.
So what we're going to be looking to do today is looking at the idea of self-improvement. And so when we're talking about a series that's designed to get us to improve ourselves, one of the things that a lot of people take for granted is knowing how to learn, right? Like there are basic principles and techniques to learning that you should actually acknowledge and understand and think about when you head into trying to make improvements in yourself. And so for the agenda, we're going to be looking at mistake tolerance, the ability to deal with mistakes. We're looking at identifying improvement opportunities. How do we find the right things to improve? The principle of repetition, and then focus and simplicity. And that'll be the rough guideline that we're going for uh, this evening. And yes, going for stuffy boardroom is exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm glad you caught that vibe there. Appreciate that. So let's go right in. Mistake tolerance. When we're looking to improve, one of the things that's fascinating is a lot of people are afraid to improve because they're afraid of making mistakes. And when you go down a path of trying to improve, one of the things that you're going to run into is having to conquer that fear that may exist. And you may not even realize that you're afraid because fear kind of manifests itself in different ways, but you start to unconsciously make excuses for yourself for why you can't improve or why you're not going to improve. And generally speaking, it falls in one of these three categories. And these are not exhaustive, but these are three that I've seen most commonly. First one at the top of the list, fear of ridicule. And that's something that in the gaming environment we're well acquainted with because all we know is talking crap and letting people have it when they make mistakes. And that fear of ridicule sometimes drives people to the point of being afraid to make mistakes and therefore not challenging themselves to improve. A fear of lost self-esteem or a fear of or lost reputation. When you take opportunities to commit to improve yourself or commit to improve some matter of your gameplay, you're going to fail and you're going to not perform as well as you did in a context where you're just playing, right? And I think that'll be more obvious when we go through this, but some of the improvement techniques that you should consider involve actually accepting bad performance to improve a very focused element of either your gameplay or whatever it is you're trying to improve on. And that accepts failure. And sometimes that's going to mean you don't look so good. Your performance is going to go down as you're focusing on improving a narrow aspect of what you're doing. And so that's something that's really, really critical to keep in mind and be aware of. And then there's that self-esteem, right? If you go and you perform badly and you perform badly and you perform badly because you're trying to focus on getting better, sometimes that just doesn't feel very good and you're afraid of that. You don't want to lose that. And that can keep you from improving. And then ultimately, and I'll think of this again in the context of kind of the games we play, a fear of lost material. Like if you're going out and you're going to improve in vehicles, you're going to be risky with your vehicle gameplay, then you can kind of be afraid to lose that material, and that can prevent you from taking necessary risks that could improve your gameplay. Um,
Now, if
Go ahead.
I just want to chime in here, especially on the fear of lost material, because I feel like I have at least some things I can offer. Because i- my background is I do artillery for our clan, and the big and best guns is using the field artillery, which is one of the most expensive things in the game with the most expensive firepower to use. And a lot of the times, just like from random or casual play, most of the time people want to play and play it safe because there's a lot of firepower in these things. But a big driving force is this vehicle is like the key to any successful assault, and you always have to use this very risky, and you have to come to acceptance of, yeah, I will lose it, not to get yourself attached to it, but you will playing in video games, and if you want to succeed, you have to make these risks. If you don't, you're always just going to be you're gonna be you're it's just a simple saying. You're gonna miss every chance you don't take. And if any of these three, you can try to negate. Try not to worry about the loss of material, because that in the end it's all material. It can be replaced. Don't ever let that be a reason for you not to do anything.
And that's, I mean, I think one of the things I see is that, you have a lack of experience in artillery, a lack of experience in mechanized because of the risk associated with that material. Like, you have a lot of very talented infantry players because you can grind out your skills and talents in infantry with very little, no consequence here. And there's in all of these areas actually, because if you die as an infantryman, you're expected to die. There's no ridicule there.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But if you die in a tank, you get ridiculed. You've lost the material. You've lost respect. I mean, you get all these three things coming at you from people that don't appreciate, the bigger picture, right? And so one of the things that I mentioned earlier that I really want to emphasize is that sometimes you don't even realize that you're afraid. And Fancy calls it gear fear, and that's 100% right. It's gear fear. And for those of us that have played Tarkov, we know a lot about this because in the Tarkov context, for those of you that know anything about Tarkov, you go out into the field with whatever you bring, and if you die in Tarkov, you lose everything you brought with you. And what it does is it prevents people from bringing good equipment in the field for fear of losing it. And that happens in that game, and it happens in any game where there's some kind of risk versus reward. But generally speaking, the idea of one of the best things to get over gear fear is the best recommendation is when you bring that gear in the field, just in your mind say this gear is lost. I am not expecting to come back with this, and if I come back with it, that's a privilege. But just accepting that it's loss gives you the freedom to use it to its full potential. Not to be reckless with it, but to be appropriately aggressive and try to make plays with whatever you've given, be it an arty piece or be it an M4. You know what I mean? And so try to make sure that you kind of keep that in mind. So evidence of fear, anger and resentment. That may seem like a weird one to kind of attach to this, but very frequently what happens is people get angry and they get frustrated, and that kind of overshadows the fear that they're feeling from these previous fears of failure that they're experiencing. And excuses, man, we all got them, and you see it all the time, but a lot of people make a lot of excuses for their failure instead of learning from their failure. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to learn from our failure and how to grow from that. But one of the worst things that you can do is to start making excuses for why you failed or why the situation failed. Because one of the most important principles I feel is taking ownership of any situation that you're a part of and coming to the realization that yes, you could have done something differently. And maybe, just maybe, that would have been different. And you may not own the full breadth of the failure there. But if you can conceive of one thing that you could have done differently, one thing to improve yourself, maybe you could have changed the outcome. And jumping in on the excuses of immediately drawing conclusions about failure from somebody else's perspective hampers your ability to improve, and you cheat yourself of opportunities to improve and improve your own gameplay. And I want to use an example that's very close to my head right now because of this debate about vehicles. And I'll use it from the warden perspective so I'm not biased, but when mortar half tracks came out last war and the wardens started getting pushed all over the playground, immediately what you heard was complaining about the strength of mortar half track. And it was strong. I'm not going to debate that it wasn't strong. But what you saw, what was fascinating to me, is the sheer volume of people that made excuses for their mistakes, saying, oh, we lost this because of the mortar half track. There's nothing I can do about it. That's wrong. That's a bad attitude. Yes, the mortar half track is strong, but what you're doing is you're being defeated in your own mind before you've even hit the battlefield. And maybe there was something you could have done against that mortar half track. Sure, they've got an advantage. You're at a disadvantaged position. But when you start getting a sense of hopelessness within you and start making excuses, you cheat yourself of all manner of self-improvement, and you begin to stop seeing opportunities to win. And that's how a lot of people, people talk about the morale in Foxhole and how morale is a big part of it, and I don't disagree with that. I just kind of agree with it maybe for different reasons, because it's people defeat themselves in their head before they're defeated on the battlefield. And that happens all the time. It happens, I think, with the Colonials and the Silverhand. Again, I think the Silverhand is a strong piece of equipment, but I've seen a lot of Colonial mistakes that they just completely and totally trump up to the strength of the Silverhand and aren't assessing their own opportunities in their gameplay in the same way that the Wardens did with the mortar half-track hitting the field. And the process of doing that is connected to this last bullet point. And then, Dark, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but check your ego. That's something that you're going to hear me talk about a lot as we go through this and as we study. If we do more and more on this and we train more on this, checking your ego is one of the most important things that you can do toward really a lot of things, but definitely for improvement, is getting out of your own head, getting your pride out of the way, and being able to detach from that situation and take a very reasonable and rational look at what you're actually dealing with, and then and only then can you actually look at your mistakes, look at and realize that you've made mistakes, and then improve on those things. People, generally speaking, can't learn from mistakes because they didn't even realize they made them. Any thoughts, Stark?
I oh, sorry. You caught me. Even though I got the red carpet, I was still going there. So, check your ego is definitely going to be a thing you're going to hear a lot from this whole TED talk we're issuing you guys out, because in the end of the day, the only thing we could ever have to ourselves is how we feel and our egos, and that's one of the things. Is not trying to like force you guys, like, don't always try to think you're the biggest and baddest. Get out there, but end of the day, if you want to be a successful leader, you have to check your ego, because you can't let something so small really affect you in your gameplay, because it could actually like really ruin things if you don't even take it into consideration, because you could just be making terrible decisions just because you care too much about your reputation or your ego, or you think you're better than this, or you're lesser than that. There's just things you have to just take into consideration, especially if you want to improve yourself as a leader, just in general.
Yeah,
And
feedback.
I think
Fancy is the nail on the head. Take feedback. Don't take feedback as an attack. Take it as an aid, right? And a lot of people struggle, and there's a whole body of knowledge around giving constructive feedback, so it doesn't come across as attack, so you can improve the effectiveness of your feedback. There's a whole study on that alone. But even with people that don't deliver feedback constructively, if you check your ego and you don't get offended by that, you don't let your blood rise, you can actually find nuggets of wisdom and stuff people tell you. Even people that tell you rude stuff, you can learn from that. I know that I hesitate to mention this, but I'll go anyway. A lot of people sometimes don't take Avidus's correction very well. We'll just call it what it is. Avidus sometimes comes down pretty hard, but he, generally speaking, has a good point when he does. Should he be more tactful? Perhaps, but that doesn't mean you should discard his opinion just because it came across too raw.
He is blunt, but if you digest his words and what he want, he's teaching you a lesson in a sense. If you get what we're trying to paint you at, and it's just like he said earlier. Yeah, he could take a humble approach, but that's just how he is. That's what we have to get comfortable and not take it personally, and take it as constructive. Just as soon as you let your feelings get hurt, then you won't even think about what you messed up. You're just worried about this guy just made me upset. And there is a fine line across, but I think we all know what is that line. But I think it's just understanding the situation and seeing what could have you done better.
Yeah, for
But no,
sure.
that's something I still struggle. Even to this day. I'm still oftentimes trying to check my ego as best as possible, or I think I've done a little bit better with ridiculing and excuses, and mainly checking the ego. But it's still something that we're all normal people, we're all humans, we all make mistakes. So it's just trying to learn a good chunk of empathy always helps out in the end.
Oh my God. Yeah, there's a whole subject on empathy and the power of empathy and how you can approach and change your mind and change your outlook. But you're 100% right. If you believe that ego isn't giving you any problems, chances are you got an ego problem. Like it's so weird how like it's like people that think that they're humble probably aren't humble. It kind of falls in that principle. It's just interesting how that works. So let's talk about
The
for a
next,
minute about how to identify areas of improvement. And so, and the very first step in that is kind of related to the previous thought is you need to remove the idea that you can't win from the very beginning. Remove that pessimism and remove that defeatist attitude right from the start so that you can open your mind enough to say, okay, what could I have done differently? And a lot of people just don't even want to go through that exercise. They go into the field, they fail, they die, whatever, and they're just like, that was unfortunate, is what they'll say. That was unlucky, is what they'll say. Or that guy was lucky. Or there was nothing I could do about that. How many times have you heard a phrase like that? How many times have you uttered a phrase like that? Whereas if you took a second instead to say, man, where did that go wrong? You actually assess the situation. Chances are you could have probably done something very, very differently, but you'll never realize it because you didn't even open your mind enough to the possibility that you could have influenced that situation. And so, looking at the questions that you can ask, were there other options? And I'm going to use three examples here. Again, this isn't exhaustive, but I think it's useful to consider. Was your position unfavorable? Again, if you're talking about the Foxhole, position is pretty much everything in the game. And so, if you're perishing, if you're failing, chances are there was something with your position and you had some issue in judgment that led you to that unfavorable position. And that's a very general statement, but that statement applies to so many different situations, be it in Foxhole or in life or as a leader. I mean, I can take that into a professional context of, if I get into a bad conversation with somebody. So if kind of dipping away for a Foxhole for a second, if I go into an environment where I'm stressed out and I'm having a tough day. I know that I've got some problems with my attitude, and then I go and I try to have a difficult conversation with somebody. Let's say I'm going to be disciplining an employee, and I'm already stressed out. That's a bad time to have that conversation, especially if I know that that employee is going to be pushing back against me, is going to disagree, maybe aggressive or ugly. If I'm not prepared for that conversation, I've put myself in an unfavorable situation. I'm already in a position where I'm predisposed to lose. I'm predisposed to lose my temper, to lose my cool, to make a bad judgment call, to say the wrong thing because I haven't positioned myself well for success. Or I walk into that conversation, I haven't even prepared for it. I go in and I'm cocky and I'm confident and I haven't even premeditated what that person could think, what they might be feeling, what they could say, and suddenly they hit me with a bombshell that I now have to deal with on my toes because I didn't prepare enough in advance of that conversation to have that hard conversation. And that's a professional context. Now let's take it back to the Foxhole one. In a Foxhole context, how many times are you caught flat-footed? This is kind of to the third bullet point there. But a lot of times we get forced into making errors because we didn't plan sufficiently in advance. We didn't know how we were going to react. One of the things that you can do to improve is you want to automate and make unconscious as many habits as you can, as many good habits as you can. And one of the ways you can do that is through preparation. And so there's a famous saying that no battlefield survives contact with the enemy, and that's a very good saying. And good battle plans have contingencies built into them. And you're not going to lay out for every contingency, but you can lay out a few things that you know are reasonable expectations and improve the probability of your overall plan succeeding. Because not only have you had your overall general plan, you've already thought down the line of one or two, three contingencies that could have happened, so that when that thing happens, you're not caught saying, okay, well, I've never thought about this before. How am I going to respond to this? And if you're in a tight situation, and you've got resources on the line, sometimes that's the difference between a whole operation living and dying. And so if you're, let's say responsible for commanding an armored column, and you haven't prepared in your head in advance what happens if some colonial armor comes out of the darkness on your flank, then you're going to be caught flat-footed in that situation, not able to respond. And those precious seconds you wait in a decision are the difference between living and dying in that situation. Mechanically, you may be a god. You may have prepared in advance and put yourself in a favorable situation, but you're left unprepared because you didn't prepare properly for that contingency. You didn't think about it, and therefore you're losing precious seconds that could be the difference between defeat and success. And then the middle one, I know I've danced through some of these bullet points, but the middle one is more of a mechanical issue. And this one's probably the easiest to resolve, in my opinion. A lot of people are most comfortable resolving mechanical issues. They understand resolving mechanical issues because there's a lot of very reliable techniques to improving mechanical issues. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I will mention the nature of like improving in first-person shooters, for instance, because it's something I'm really intimately familiar with. I spent a lot of time in the first-person shooter scene when I was like competing in gaming. I was very competitive. I wanted to win. I was part of a competitive roster. We competed professionally on the world stage even, and we played to win. And so we grinded out every advantage that we could, and that included making sure that our mechanical skill was as crisp and as polished as it could. And so what did we do? How did we prepare? How did we improve? Well, practice. We repeated techniques. We grinded out certain things that would make us very consistent. So one that's very popular in first-person shooters is the very basic principle of crosshair placement. And the very basic idea is that your crosshair should always be where you anticipate the enemy might appear. That may seem like a no-brainer. That seems like a easy thing to do, but you'd be amazed how many players have their crosshair aimed at the ground instead of at head level of the corner that they're getting ready to round. And as they're rounding that corner, they're moving their crosshair along with that so that when an enemy appears, they don't have to move their crosshair very far. And the more you move your crosshair, the more inaccurate you are and the less reliable you are for your shot. And so what happens then for really good players, and what's really become average players at this point, is crosshair placement is something we do unconsciously. I don't have to think about placing my crosshair where I anticipate the enemy to be. I do that unconsciously at this point. It's not conscious, but I had to practice that because when I was an amateur competitor, my crosshair was aimed at the ground. Like I was aimed at the feet of the guy that I might be around the corner. So I'd have to flick my aim up to try to hit that guy in the head, and as a result, I'm going to miss more shots that way. And so how did I fix it? Well, I spent all my gameplay focused on crosshair placement. For hours, all I did was make sure my crosshair is exactly what it was. You know what I did? What happened? I performed badly. I lost more engagements. I wasn't thinking about the bigger situation because all of my focus was dedicated on getting that one thing right. But after hours and hours of grinding that became an unconscious habit. And then I moved on to the next thing. I noticed that my flick is off, that for whatever reason, I'm missing shots by like an inch, like a quarter of an inch. So what do? I practice those 5-inch flicks. And so I go into an environment that's in a controlled environment, and I practice that very controlled maneuver of getting my muscle memory in place where I'm automatically going to know what that muscle feeling is. And so what it is it's repeating just over and over again. Just find that frame of reference, move 5 feet, click. Move 5 feet, click, and make sure I never miss. You never miss the target, and you do that enough times, and then you go and you practice it and you apply it. And so that's the combination of repetition and focused learning where you're accepting shortcomings in your gameplay to focus on other elements to make them unconscious. So in the future, when I go and I round a corner and I need to flick somebody, I've already done that flick 100 times, 200 times, 500 times, and my muscle memory is going to remember it, and I'm going to more reliably hit that shot without even thinking about it. In fact, what you'll find when you're really good at that kind of stuff is that you'll kill somebody and you weren't even conscious you killed them. Like because you've just trained your body and your mind so much, and your reflexes are in tuned with your hand, and you just do it without even thinking about it. And that's how you bring your reaction times down, your consistency up. Now that's a very raw mechanical example, but I want you to think about that very idea and that principle in the broader context of self-improvement, because those principles on a mechanical level can be applied on the cerebral level as well. It can be applied on the decision-making level, both in the way that you perform yourself professionally and the way that you perform in game. It's about honing good behaviors and honing very good unconscious behaviors. This may seem ridiculous, but it's something that I hope you guys would empathize with. But if you are driving a car, one of the things that I hope you have honed is the idea of turn signals. And why is it that you use your turn signal at a stop sign when nobody is there? Because you've trained it to be an unconscious behavior that you don't have to think about. And so you're not consciously doing that. You're automatically doing that every single time, and therefore your consistency of that behavior is very consistent because you've trained that muscle memory within yourself so you don't have to consciously do it. And therefore you can leave your attention and focus on other things as a result. Dark, I know that's a huge mouthful, but any thoughts on what we've covered so far?
Again, I like to just restate I am not qualified to say this shit at all. Like
Go for it, man.
I feel like I'm just a student right now, just learning. I'm like, yes, yes, like writing this down because this is all like good stuff. 'Cause I don't have any. I,
That's
I
fine.
don't really do that much infantry play, so it's like I can't really give good relations on that.
But
Uh,
so, I mean, infantry and playing Foxhole is a good example of it because crosshair placement in Foxhole is probably more important than almost any other game. Because not only do you have your muscle memory to contend with, you have the game fighting with you. Because the more you move your mouse as an infantryman, the more your accuracy decreases in game. So, like, there's RNG in the game based on how much you move your crosshair. So, if you're really good with crosshair placement, not only are you helping your muscle memory, you're helping your reaction time. You're fighting the in-game mechanic that's built in to defeat you. And so
so
it's actually really important.
how would you go about more on the topic of panicking and getting frustrated with the game's
Hmm.
mechanics?
Yes.
Just more so like when you just to add on to it, you
Yeah.
get surprised from an enemy coming from an angle you weren't prepared for. You turn over the accuracy. We all know how Foxhole is. It's already abysmal, but you're already in that panic state of the colonialists or the enemy shooting at you, and you're at that split decision. Should I wait 1 second to get that accuracy, or should I just fire and let the chances go? And the longer and longer that engagement goes, you get more and more frustrated because the game mechanics is working against you. But
Right.
if you can just talk on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that situation is no longer a mechanics issue. It's an issue of both judgment and preparation. And so, from a preparation perspective, what is your immediate perspective? What have you premeditated you're going to do if you get flanked? And believe it or not, my immediate reaction, my first impulse, if I get flanked and I get shot from an angle that I'm not in a prepared firing position for, is to retreat. I fall back out of that situation. And the reason for that is that guy has gotten the drop on me. He has a favorable crosshair placement and he has favorable accuracy because he's had time to gain his accuracy. And if he missed me, then I've got that his failure has generated an opportunity for me to level the ground once again. And leveling the ground is not turning on him and trying to win that duel. It's escaping that situation. And there are factors that adjust that, right? That's where judgment comes in and how you've prepared how you're going to respond to different situations. But I've already prepared my mind. If I'm flanked, I'm going to try to escape from that situation. I'm not going to try to engage because I'm more likely to escape than I am to win if he's already in a prepared firing position over me. And I've won countless engagements against a guy who got the drop on me, and through the mercy of God, he missed me. I escaped by sprinting away from him, and I either baited him into chasing me, so I'm in a favorable firing position. I flanked him, and he was still waiting for me to come back, and I hit him from 90, 180 degrees the other way. Uh, Whatever it is. And I know there's a lot of players that have different methods of trying to engage that situation. Idle sitting there saying that he hits the deck prone and tries to flip on the guy. That can work if the terrain is favorable for that. There are situations where that can work. I generally don't favor that because I've found in my experience I lose more of those. Like I win more engagements by retreating and flanking than I do by hitting the deck and trying to return fire. But there are cases where that is the best situation. That comes with experience, and that comes with how you've prepared for that. And a lot of preparation comes from experience. Your previous experience has helped you prepare for the future. That's where practice comes in and grinding. But I think that when you think about like things on a strategic level, there are only so many things that you can practice in certain contexts. So Artie is a good example of that, or even mechanized is a good example of that. We have some of our mechanized guys are extremely talented because not only have they prepared well for how they think about engagements, they've been in countless engagements. Whereas other of our mechanized guys, we've got some new mechanized guys that have exceptionally good judgment very early. I'll give a shout out to Gucci. Gucci's one of our newer mechanized members, and he's got very good judgment for a new Foxhole player. Why? Because he's got a very good cerebral understanding. He's prepared himself mentally for what that engagement should look like, what's favorable and unfavorable, and he makes very good decisions in spite of his relative inexperience in the domain. And that's a huge difference maker.
I think probably the last thing I'll chime in, just in the context of falling back into a better position, it could also good synergize well if you're in a squad, and you guys are all together, and one guy gets the drop on you, but you take that step to just take a 5 steps back, and you have your squad mates there, able
Hmm.
to pick up, just to pretty much get that time to you conserve your own life while also giving your squad mates, the chance to fire back at you so you can get back at the line.
And I hope some of the people in the squad that have been in the squads may have seen this happen because I have baited colonials into kill zones more times than I care than I can count. But it's amazing how effective it is that you fall back from a position and make people think that you're routing, and then they just blindly chase, and it gives you the extra 5 seconds to find a piece of cover or to flip on them and get your accuracy, and suddenly they're the ones sprinting with no accuracy, and you're in a prepared firing position. That I mean, especially if you got a fire team. Oh my God, if I got 3 riflemen, maybe we'll execute some collies. It's just fascinating. And even Dark, we were playing a little bit last night. I'm not sure if you caught some of it, but we did a lot of those repositions and remaneuvers on the collies that we were playing around with just when we were screwing around last night, and we were exceptionally effective.
Oh my God, you're teaching me while we were playing. I feel like it's a cardinal sin.
Yeah, yeah. I
But
mean,
no,
but it's
you're
a real.
right. Now I'm thinking about it, you're completely right on that. I mean, because it was just me and you, just straight casual play, and we were just dominating on that field. Like if you were playing in abandoned ward yesterday around probably around this time,
Saltbrook.
you know, and so my bad, wrong, completely wrong region and map. If you're in Saltbrook and in fuck, I just completely got train wrecked right now.
It's
Sorry.
all right. You Saltbrook pushing old Jack Tar, just fighting with some FMGs. Had a good time. But yeah, I mean, it was a really good example, I think, of just some very very basic mechanics of making good decisions and what that can do when you think about your play. And that really comes back to one of the things that I try to do, and I don't always do this, but when I die, I take because I've got this nice 30-second respawn timer. I take that 30 seconds, generally speaking, thinking carefully, what could I have done differently to have not died there? And I go through that in my head. And maybe I come to the conclusion that me dying there was the best thing that could be happen for the team. Sometimes it's the truth, but I want to at least consider it. I want to at least think about, did I make a mistake? And if I did make a mistake, what could have what could have been changed? And I go down to all kinds of crazy minutia in that, to the extent of, if I had been with my squad member there, so even if I watch a teammate die, if I watch Dark die, was there something I could have done to prevent that from happening as a teammate? To be a better teammate, not just better rifleman, but to be a better teammate. Could I have helped that situation if I'd been a little bit faster, if I had anticipated his movements a little bit better? Uh, his death was preventable from my side, not just his own. When you start taking ownership of the whole battlefield, then a whole world of opportunities opens up for you to improve your total performance as a player. And this level of ownership is very life changing. Okay, I'll tell you right now, because I'm putting in the context of Foxhole. I want you to not only limit yourself to looking at your own gameplay. I want you to think about what you can do in your own life, professionally, in school, in relationships, to start taking ownership of your own perspective and taking ownership of your own mistakes and the own outcomes happening around you. Because when you do that and you actually premeditate a thought of, gosh, that person's real pissed off. What happened to them? What's wrong with them? Well, what if you ask the question, I really upset that person. What did I do wrong there? Was there something that I did that maybe I could have done differently that would have changed that situation, and I'd been able to influence that person for the better, for their benefit and for my benefit? And when you start thinking in those terms, world opportunity opens up. You own the things that happen around you, the good things and the bad things that aren't apparently your responsibility. You can find ways to influence things that you thought were closed doors before. And so it's very, very
And
important
also,
principle. Good.
like, doesn't also, like, it goes hand in hand with the more you're willing to take ownership for yourself, your own actions, and what's going on around you, the less and less you'll get to use excuses.
Mm-hmm.
Like those start dwindling down more or less and less, because now you're taking ownership, and just mentally and preparing yourself, you don't have an excuse because you own the situation. And if you know how to handle it and handle it well, you won't end up in a situation where you have an excuse, or you'll just come to an acceptance that, yeah, that was me. I
Mm-hmm.
did, I did fuck up on that. It wasn't because of him. Even though, it's like, yeah, he came in here and did his thing, but what did I do? Instead of just leaving it as an excuse, you go and deal with whatever the guy did, because you have ownership to just do it. But that's just all I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really good point. And if one thing that you'll find is that if you want to find mistakes in people's gameplay, you don't have to look very hard, because mistakes are everywhere. If you want to find mistakes in leaders, you don't have to look very hard. Even the best leaders make mistakes all the time, constantly. And what happens is a lot of people make excuses for their own mistakes by focusing on other people's mistakes. And I want to give you kind of an example of something that works. So let's take, this work. Let's say in a chain of command, for instance. So let's say that we have an operation. I'm just going to use very generic examples here. We have an operation, and the Legion commander, the person responsible for the operation, says, "Okay, guys, we're going to take this hill," and we fail to take that hill. What should happen in a world where everybody's owning the situation is the LC should have said, "You know what, guys? I looked at that situation and I underestimated our enemy. I did not realize how strong they were, and I did not set you guys up for success. I didn't call in the right resource. We didn't bring the right equipment. These are things that I could have done differently to make this successful." And at the same time, the infantry guys should, "You know what? I'm sorry we didn't take the hill. I'm responsible for not taking the hill. When we were pushing that hill, I suicided my guys into the strongest part of that hill. When there was an opportunity 5 to 10 meters to the north, if I had taken a second to look at that situation, I would have spotted that, and we would have had a chance for success." And the arty guys are like, "You know what? I'm responsible that we didn't take this hill. I didn't get the artillery set up in the right way. I failed to adequately set up for the coordinates. I failed to get my arty in place in time. I lost whatever it is." Taking ownership for that piece of it, or finding something that, even if it's minute, that you could have done differently. Or maybe it's like, "You know what? I didn't think that was a good plan, and I failed to speak up. I failed to tell the LC that this was not a good plan." Or I did tell the LC and I didn't persuade him. I didn't give him enough information that he could understand that taking this hill was a bad idea. You see what I'm saying, though? When you start to think in those terms and you really truly own a situation, and it cascades all the way down the leadership chain, what you get is, you don't get a blame game. You get a whole series of self-improvements. And so, yeah, we failed to take the hill, but 10 guys just got better as leaders because they looked at the situation and saw something that they could have done differently, that they're not going to make that mistake of again. Whereas in another scenario where the one LC is like, "You guys are a whole bunch of effing idiots. I don't know why you guys didn't take this hill." And the other 9 guys are like, "This guy's a moron. We were never going to take this hill. I don't know why you thought we were going to take this hill. It's a bad plan." And how many times does that situation happen? More commonly than the first one, I imagine. It's really something to really carefully think about. And all you can do is own your own inputs into that, own your own perspective on it.
And that's where, like saying it earlier, you have like just like the example he gave, where you have the people taking ownership of the situation of what happened in the operation, and then you have people failing to own up and just start putting the blame. And you see where, taking ownership help build humility. Yeah, right? Is that the word,
That's the right
right?
word.
And then the latter just produces excuses and blames, and like one side, you just feel like, wow, it feels good to just be in this environment. You don't feel like everyone's or anyone's going to harass or hurt you. The other one is, fuck, why am I even playing with these guys? And it completely, it helps re-entice the enjoyment of what little, just gaming or anything in general has to offer. You're like, do you want to put yourself in that situation where you're talking to someone and something doesn't go their way, and the first thing they're doing is just blaming you? Fuck
Right.
no. I want to go. I want to go somewhere else, and just, because that's not even a room for improvement of just some person just yelling at you. And
Right.
especially for something you're doing as a hobby, it's like, no, you are worth more than whatever, that whole situation is. And the best thing you can always do is just lead by example. You can't force someone else to take ownership, but you can start with yourself.
Absolutely. And you've probably seen, I think all of us, and especially if you've been in the gaming world for a while, have seen somebody that has put like 1,000 hours into something and they're still bad at it. And you're like, how has this person played this so long and is still so inept at this? And the reason is because they never took the time to practice. They never took the time to improve. I think a very common example I've seen of this is, if you like look at I hate to do this because it may breed problems, but if you look like at Dota players are generally speaking, and I hate to stereotype, but a lot of Dota players are quite helpless with themselves because they go into these Dota games and they get so raged so fast, and they get tilted and they lose the match. And they're like, "I lost because my team's a bunch of effing idiots. I can never get queued with the right teammates, bottom fed, and whatever it is." But they will make excuse after excuse after excuse after excuse, and they will permanently be stuck in an area of not improving and changing their gameplay because they don't. And anybody else that watches them play, what's fascinating, if you find a better player than them and they were to watch them play, they'd be like, "No wonder this guy's losing. Look at all the mistakes he's making." But he doesn't have the self-awareness that he's making mistakes because he's too busy seeing mistakes of the other people he's queued with. Because yes, his teammates are making mistakes, but what he doesn't realize is the opponents are making mistakes as well. And he's failing to, number one, capitalize on the mistakes of his opponents. Number two, buffer the weaknesses of his teammates, and number three, improve himself. And that happens and replicates itself a million times a day across League of Legends, Dota, whatever the example is. And it's a really fascinating thing because that community is filled with ragers. And I could go on that. I could crap on the Dota community for the rest of this for the rest of the stream, but that wouldn't be constructive. So that is. I mean, it's really a huge thing. It's really something to think about. I'm gonna go ahead and move to the next slide though, so we keep this moving here. So I've already kind
Yeah,
of
we gotta
talked.
pick up the pace.
I already talked a lot about repetition, okay, and how it's important. I want to talk about repetition in the negative context, okay? Because one of the things that you see, and it's really relevant to this Dota example, is what you find happen in all, and we are all guilty of this, okay? So don't start criticizing or being overly critical, but practicing being bad, like, and that may seem like a weird thing to say, but your habits ultimately become what you do most frequently, and what do you find yourself doing most commonly? Are frequently bad habits and bad technique. And so you ultimately have a whole series of inefficiencies that you tolerate in yourself that become unconscious habits and things that you will immediately go to. If you've got bad judgment as a player, and let's say you practice just respawning and running into the enemy, and you do that 100 times, well, at a certain point, you're unconsciously going to start doing that. And one of the things that I struggled with that in Foxhole when I first started playing, because when I first started playing Foxhole, I wasn't playing in an organized fashion. I wasn't playing with a group. I was just playing by myself. And so the training is I got to get back to the front. And so I go in, I get my kit, I'd roll back to the front, and I die in a senseless meat grinder. And I just rinse and repeat that. And I felt like I was making a difference. I was having fun. I got all the positive signals that I was doing well. But in reality, I'm not really doing a whole heck of a lot. It's a bad habit. And one of the things that a lot of new rips coming into DK struggle with is working within our organizational structure and working in a disciplined fire team that moves to complete objectives, take meaningful engagements, and take meaningful positions, as opposed to just rolling into the meat grinder, Scarus being excluded. If I could kind of dig it in for a second. But you know what? It's funny how those habits happen, because when you get stressed and you're in a high pressure situation, you go to your unconscious habits. And those unconscious habits show up. If you've ever seen a really streaky player, like for those of you that have followed any bit of the first person shooter scene, there's one of the biggest things that FPS players struggle with is consistency. You have players that are like really streaky, and they just they're very momentum based. They're very emotional players. American players, generally speaking, in the professional scene, are very guilty of this. That they one of the things, and this is an overgeneralization, I know this isn't true all the time, but when I look at like a professional American teams in the FPS scene, when they have momentum and they're rolling, they are like unstoppable. Like they get a couple wins under their belt and they start to hit their shots. They start to hit more shots, and they just get lost in that adrenaline rush. They get in the zone and they just slaughter and they snowball. And then on the flip side, if things start to go bad for them, they start to get frustrated. Then they start to fall back on bad habits that they've trained through being all-stars. And so as an all-star player, what they've done with a lot of their time playing is they've relied on their raw mechanical skill, and they go into bad situations. They use bad judgment because they've practiced bad judgment, and they try to win using their talent. But when they're up against a player that's just as talented as they are, they fail. And they can't reconcile in their head. It's like, gosh, I've done this 1,000 times and it doesn't work in this professional context. Why not? And a lot of amateur players make that mistake that are, well, or what I like to call pub all-stars. They go in and they do a lot of maneuvers that work, because they style on noobs, and then they try to bring that to a competitive environment, and it doesn't work. And they're trying to figure out what the heck's going on. Why are they not owning like they usually own? Well, because they've practiced bad habits. And what you'll find is that you can win an engagement. You can win a fight and still play poorly. And a lot of people really struggle to figure that out and try to get that through their head. But I've seen a lot of battles like that we've won, even like as DK, where we just like reinforce bad behavior. The worst thing we could have done was won. Like we played awfully. Our execution was off. It was poor, and we still won. And we're like high-fiving, like, yeah, we killed it. We rocked. We took the objective. And I'm just like, gosh, but we made all these mistakes, and we don't have the presence of mind to recognize them because we had the misfortune of winning. And that happens a lot to players and individuals when they get rewarded by really bad behavior. They're like, we'll take an example of, I'm going to use shadow dancing as an example, actually, because I consider shadow dancing actually to be a bad mechanical habit that players pick up on, and they do it because it works against inexperienced players. They will roll into a fight, and they'll dance in front of the enemy, and they'll flick that shot, and they'll get it, and they'll win that engagement, and then they'll get that adrenaline rush because they just styled on somebody, and they'll forget the last 7 times that they tried that and got turned into a bloody miss. They only remember the 3 times it worked and ignore the 7 times that they just gave their life away like an idiot. As opposed to another player that plays very intelligently, he chooses a good firing position, he maneuvers well, and then 9 times in 10 he's winning engagements. It's not stylish, it's not flashy, but it's consistent and it's effective. And through the combination of good mechanics and good decision making, you can be a better player. And like Idle said, I agree. Idle to some extent, shadow dancing is not a skill to completely poo-poo on. I want to say that there are some players that over rely on shadow dancing and over commit to flashy plays that are bad technique. And yes, there are certain times where you need to get yourself out of a bad situation. I consider it, when I'm shadow dancing, generally speaking, it's because I'm in a bad situation I'm trying to buy myself out of. I'm in a low percentage engagement where I'm in all probability going to lose, and I'm trying to bail myself out by hoping that guy makes a mistake. And so, yeah, it can't exist for that, but relying on it and leaning into it heavily, I think is bad technique. And that's just one man's opinion, okay? I am happy to be wrong about that, and I am happy to be disagreed with. It's just one example of many that we could use as a possible habit where you are practicing being mediocre. Uh, so I think that that's really, that's all I want to say on that. Dark, anything to offer before we move on to the next part of the section?
Other than just, I mean, my general disgust for shadow dancing also comes with the frustration it brings just from the game's mechanics. But
Sure.
also, like, you're completely right with, yeah, sure, like the guy, shadow dance manages to kill you that one time, and it just fucking sucks. But just rethink about it, like rewind like 10 minutes before you died. You probably killed a guy that was trying to shadow dance on you like 7 times.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, then he finally just got lucky and killed you once. It's like, and it comes all into that thing we said at the beginning of it. If you put yourself in that position where, oh yeah, you already lost because the guy was shadow dancing, you're gonna lose every time you believe that just because he's shadow dancing, I have no chance to fucking get this guy, or this guy is running at me with a pistol. It's like, oh, this is bullshit. I think I was complaining about it yesterday, like
Hmm.
the amount of people that are just rushing at us with pistols. We were killing them more times than they were killing us, and it's like, while you're just in game, you just forget, or you don't even think about the times you've killed those people. You just worry about the time they finally get you one time, and it's like the world's on fire at that point. And that's the one thing, it's like it's real hard to switch your mindset, because I could just say, like, I probably did more than half of these things not to do yesterday. Because, say for example, just from going off the bat, killed like 10 colonials. One guy shadow dances and hits me with the pistol. I'm bleeding. I miss. I'm getting frustrated. He gets me. Fuck. And then my brain shuts off. I just grab some ammo. I go up to the front. I'm not even like thinking. I'm just like, just out of rhythm, trying to get back to Kaz, and I die again because I just wasn't paying attention. I was just, all this, and just when you have that mindset of, you know, fuck this. You're really only just hurting yourself at that point. And that's the one thing you really got to shake off is, you're doing more good than what you actually believe you are.
And that's where it kind of, if I could run it back, it kind of comes back to your ego, right? What you get frustrated because that guy styled on you in shadow dance. Why is that frustrating? Because your ego got hurt a little bit, right? In one context or another,
Yeah.
you feel that guy just styled on you, and that sucks. That guy's an a-hole, and it makes it's even worse when he rubs it in, right? He rolls up to you and teabags you a little bit, and he talks some crap over the microphone. And one of the best things that you can do as a player and as a person is to just let that stuff roll off your back, right? And that's an example of Foxhole. You need to do that in life. Somebody shadow dances on you in life and teabags you. Don't worry about it. Let it roll off your back. That guy's an a-hole. It's fine.
Because
Detach.
9 out of 10 times, they're doing that trying to provoke you and get a response. And when you just let that roll off, and the best thing to always do is just be quiet. And that's probably the best response you could ever give is absolutely nothing, because now that guy is like, what the fuck, he's not saying anything back. I just fucked him over, teabagged on his body, calling him a bunch of horrible names, and he's just quiet, like what the hell is this? And in fact, that person actually starts getting upset more than you. And it's just one of those things, just don't give them what they want.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And when you think about it, so one of the things that I do is I actually turn off, and I know this would take all the joy out of Foxhole for a lot of people, but I do not have in-game sound turned on because while I'm really like I feel like I understand a lot of these principles, and I feel like I got a really disciplined mindset not to let it get under my skin, like think about it. I don't even want to have to deal with it, right? And so I turn it off so I can focus exclusively on my mechanics and decision making. And for me, it's just targets on the field, and I'm literally trying to focus the game as much strategically as I can, trying to be as good as I can strategically. And for me, all that in-game noise and all those in-game comms is a distraction from me being able to focus on that bigger picture and detach from the. And for some people that just takes all the joy out of the game, right? I completely acknowledge that could just suck all the fun out of the game for some people. So don't do that if that's not what you're. But I want to win. I play to win. I play to play out. I play to be as good as I can be, and that's where I find joy is when I play well and I do well. And so a lot of my mechanics and practices are always designed around the idea of trying to improve myself and trying to improve my gameplay in some meaningful way. And for me, voice comms don't do that. For you, don't let us like again if you're just playing to have fun, that's fine, but I'm talking about that for people that want to improve and want to move their gameplay to the next level where they're more consistent and more reliable. And I'm also talking in the context of professionally. You certainly need to learn how to detach professionally and personally if you want to get through things and you want to get through life and you want to make a difference and you want to be different in this world. Because one of the things that's really really common, in the public sector, that was really fascinating to me is that most people do not have very strong interpersonal skills. Most people do not have very good conflict resolution skills, and they don't have very good impulses when it comes to interpersonal conflict. And so it is very unique and very unusual to find somebody that has a command of their emotions and their ego and who does not let that respond to it. And I'm going to tell you right now, I would never survive as an HR guy if I got upset every time somebody called me a son of a bitch. That just would not work out. And, what I do instead is I try to help. It's a little ironic, but I try to help that person make me understand why I'm a son of a bitch, and maybe I am a son of a bitch. Maybe I do need to change something. Maybe they got a point. Or I try to explain it in such a way so they understand that maybe, just maybe, I'm not a son of a bitch, but I'm approaching it from a way that they can empathize with. I'm not condemning them. I'm opening my mind up to the situation. And if you were to approach your conflicts that way, you're going to find that things go a lot better for you. And this is way off topic from where we're at here, but it's kind of where my head naturally went. So I'll beg your mercy for that side path. All right. So we've already talked a lot about training good behaviors in some of the previous. Exact Pans has got it right there in chat. We've already talked this idea of training good behaviors, examples, and just and we've talked about all the examples there: turn signals, muscle memory, crosshair placement. I'm going to move beyond that for the sake of moving forward here. And one of the things that I've kind of talked about this slide as well, so I may just kind of move beyond it. So I'll once again apologize
The bullet points.
for how we've kind of molded all this into one thing. But hitting the bullet points real quickly, you want to reduce complex tasks to smaller habits that you can control. So I talked about muscle memory training exercises. Remember I talked about with the principle of trying to train very specific muscle memories. Those are things that can be really good to improving unconscious processes. And one of the things you need to think about as a player is that the more things that you have to do consciously, the more stressed out you are playing the game, and the less you can do. The more processes you automate, the more effective you are. And I'll give some credit to Day 9 actually. I used to play a lot of StarCraft as well and trying to learn to be a good StarCraft player. I never turned out to be a good StarCraft player. But one of the things that
Long story short.
yeah, but one of the things that I thought was really interesting, I desperately wanted to learn to play Zerg. And I could not get my actions per minute up. I just could not do it. But nevertheless, one of the things that happens in StarCraft is you get like these implant larva timings, right? And what it is it's just to explain it, if you don't have any familiarity with StarCraft, is there's a certain thing that you need to do basically every 30, 35 seconds if you want to be really efficient, okay? Just think of it that way. And so the technique to improve that is to go into a game and make sure you never miss that timing. And all you do in that round is you hit that timing. Every 35 seconds that goes by, you could try to do something else, but you make sure that you don't miss one of those timings, and every timing you hit is perfect on the money. And you do that for like 10, 20, 25 games, and you lose every single one of those games because you're focusing on just doing that. All the other aspects of your gameplay suffer because what you're trying to do is you're trying to build an unconscious habit where you're going to start doing that unconsciously. And when you find that you start hitting that rhythm where you're hitting that timing every single time, you've built an unconscious habit, and then you move to hardwire the next habit. And the same thing happens, and you've done this naturally with a whole bunch of things that you don't even think about. Even the very basic idea of moving with WASD, if you put somebody that's used a controller all their life at a keyboard and say, here, play this game, you know how hard it is for them to move with WASD? They're like running into walls. They can't navigate down a hallway in a straight line, or can only go in a straight line with very rigid things. They don't have the muscle memory required to move with WASD. But for those of us that have been playing shooters for a while, our muscle memory for using WASD, there's no conscious thought. Like when we want to move, we move without thinking about WSD. We're just moving left, right. We're doing that unconsciously because we have developed very, very strong muscle memory through literally hundreds of thousands of repetitions of doing that. And so you think about that principle just for the very simple aspect of movement, and how can you automate more processes in your gameplay so that you're making those decisions unconsciously. So again, you're automating your crosshair placement without even thinking about it. Your crosshair is in the right place. You're automating your responses and reaction times. Whenever I get flanked, I'm pulling back and I'm looking for another flank angle. Those kind of things buy time for your mind to do other things ultimately, and it makes you a more flexible player. And if you're going to be in a position like of command or of leadership, you definitely have to have that, because you can't be focusing on minutia when you need to be thinking strategically. You need to be thinking and evaluating unique situations that do demand your full attention. So the more things you have automated, the more things that are happening without you thinking about it, the better you're going to be, both as a player, a leader, or anything else. And I definitely think about that. Again, in the context of Foxhole, I think about it in life as well. And again, I'm going to use conflict management as an example because it's a popular one for me to go to. But I have certain unconscious habits that I've built into my conflict management strategy that I do without even thinking about it to try to make me more successful more frequently. And so one of the tics I have is, if I've unconsciously trained this behavior through thinking about it, through strategizing, through understanding myself. If somebody says something to me that in a hostile meeting or in a confrontational meeting that I don't expect, one of the very first things that I go to, like my comment go to, is, "I'm sorry you feel that way." I say that very, very commonly when I'm caught flat-footed, and the reason for that is two reasons. Number one, I genuinely am sorry that they're upset and they feel that way, and I didn't think of that situation. And number two, I can't say something ungracious after that. Like I can't say, "I'm sorry you feel that way, you son of a bitch." Like that doesn't work. You position yourself gracefully by strategizing in advance. And so if you premeditate situations like that and you build unconscious habits and unconscious behaviors, you can put yourself in a position to respond well to hostile situations of all kinds, be it real life, be it gaming, whatever. And it's just such a valuable way to look at things.
He's 100% correct. Next time when a colonial comes out of nowhere, all you have to say is, "I'm sorry you feel that way," and he'll just be fucking stunned. He'll just look at you like, "What?" And then you just have enough time to aim and shoot him. It works. It just works.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Go ahead.
I don't mean to cut it in because we are reaching that hour time slot. I know we want to do
Yep.
this on the dot. How many, like, as far as slides go, like, is there a
This
couple more
is,
you
I
still want to
think, the
get through?
last one actually. So we are through the
Uh,
material, right on the money there.
oh, there we go.
I told you I was
There
pretty
we
good
go.
at
I didn't even know.
that. But yeah, we
Oh,
do
you
want to
knew. You knew it.
we do want to go ahead and start wrapping things up a little bit. We have hit the 1 hour mark. One of the things that we are looking for from this is a little bit of feedback. So, to the extent that is this useful information, is this helpful information, is this something that you as a individual feel you would continue to benefit from? It's something that we're happy to do. We want to try to provide this content, namely because I enjoy talking about it, I enjoy teaching it. I had a teacher once tell me that he didn't have time to talk about things he doesn't care about, and I very much empathize with that. So I try not to train on things I don't care about. And so as a result, if this is, again, whatever you're thinking about this, if this was wasted energy, this is bullcrap, you need to hear that too, by the way. And so let us know.
The good and the bad.
Yeah, the good and the bad is what we're looking for. So we've got the No Man's Land chat and Discord, and happy to have some of your feedback there. You can always leave something here in chat as well, and we'll definitely check it out from that perspective. We do have some other ideas for future follow-ups for additional training and things that we might do. We're also exploring the option of actually streaming our Thursday night patrols that we do as well as an option. And so that is either exciting or horrifying for some of you. And again, looking for feedback on that. Is that something that you guys would enjoy doing, something that we'd like to do? I think from my perspective, what I'd like to do with that patrol, if we do that and we stream the Thursday night patrol, is show the community a little bit about what an organized platoon looks like and what an organized platoon can do, and try to demonstrate some of that in a way that's really, really, really compelling, I think, and unique, because I don't think that that's offered as well in anything that people are doing. So that's some of the thoughts. We're going to go ahead and bring the stream to a close, though, and kind of start to wrap this up. And I want to thank people that came out and listened to it, and thank in advance anybody for their feedback. And once again, thank people for your patience with us. As Dark and I are this is our first time doing this technically and organizing and bouncing off each other. It's a little new. I know that my thoughts were all over the place. I didn't even follow the rhythm perfectly for this, and so very grateful that you're patient with us on all those things. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the stream down, and thanks for tuning in. Dark, any parting comments?
Just general like stream setup, guys. Like, is the audio quality good? I know there Paz has some suggestions for just in general, just to animate the slides and maybe some bumper music. We'll see what we can do just to make things a little more lively, at least just for your guys' sake, just from hearing things. But if audio levels are nice and good, and you guys don't mind, this because this is something Kaz really wants to do, and I can just see that he's just passionate about doing this. And it's like, I don't mind just being in the same room, just like listening, because I'm like, oh my god, this is just like some interesting shit. Because I don't know, it's like if I'm at work, I'd be like, oh fuck this shit. But for some reason, I'm enticed for some reason. Maybe it's because we're friends or whatnot, or I just think the topics are genuinely interesting, and it's like, you know, you don't hear anything at work telling you like, oh, when you just killed that fucking dude, and it's like, oh, you know like you feel it's a little more relatable, and it's a good thing to listen. So I'm looking forward to this. I hope you guys do enjoy this. We're gonna try to iron things out a little more better as we go on, but overall, thank you guys again for coming out. I
All
think
right,
that's all
guys.
I got.
I appreciate it, Dark. Thank you for that, and have a good evening, everybody. Take care. Have a great night.
Later. Oh wait, the
Oh yeah,
guy,
one last
one
question.
person just
One
had.
right at the bell. So the schedule, we may work on the schedule, and we're going to work on announcing it. We kind of announced it last minute because we weren't even sure if we could get the stream to come on
Oh
live,
yeah,
and so we
the
waited
freaking.
literally to the last second. So if we stream the patrols, if we decide to stream the patrols, we will stream those on Thursday nights around 8:30 p.m. EDT. The first one is if we get good feedback and the team wants to do it. I don't want to just dump that on the guys, but if we get consensus from the squad that they want to do that, they want to participate in that, we'll do the first one actually tomorrow night. And so you can watch out for that if that's something you're interested in. For the instruction that we're planning here, Dark and I really need to figure out a day and time. I'm thinking Tuesday nights, probably around 9 EDT is what I'm thinking. But we'll hammer that out, and we'll probably put out an announcement in the DK Discord, and of course on this channel as well, to try to hammer that out and smooth that out a little bit. So I appreciate that question.
Yeah, it was real. Like we didn't even know we were gonna have a stream today because we were supposed to do it yesterday. And well, if you guys already can assume, Razor is the owner of the account, and whereas we live in the U.S. and Razor lives all the way in some rice field in Europe. So it's a really like going across the world, and it just thinks we're up to no good trying to log into his account. It's just so funny. He's just like, well, day one didn't work. Let's try day two. Razor's already fallen asleep, and it's like, well, are
Yeah.
we going to be able to hit live? And
Yeah.
well, things worked out our way. So
we kind of click the button. It's like, okay, let's see if this works. Oh, it's streaming. Okay, I guess we have to do this after all. That was pretty.
I
It
was
was
I
fantastic.
was like, I was just half hoping that it didn't work, so I could just go to sleep. But I still enjoyed our time here, though.
Yeah, good times, good times. All right, guys, we're gonna cut it there. Thank you guys for the questions and your thoughts. Have a good evening.
Have a good one.